I'm here at the studios of KALW with Diane Ravitch, Research Professor of Education at NYU. She served as Assistant Secretary of Education under the administration of George H.W. Bush. She's had a change of heart since then, to say the least, and she's author of the book, The Death and Life of the Great American School System, How Testing and Choice Are Undermining Education. And Diane, I just wanted to ask you briefly, because I know you don't have much time, about what you call corporate education reform.
Right.
Tell us about that.
Sure. Corporate education reform proceeds from two assumptions. One is that education can be treated like a business, and that you motivate people, whether students or teachers or principals, by incentives and by sanctions. And so the incentives would be cash bonuses like merit pay, and the sanctions would be if you don't get your scores up, you're going to be fired and your school will be closed. And with threats and with bonuses, you can make education better and better, except that it doesn't work. The reason it doesn't work is that you end up with everybody focused mindlessly on test scores, on teaching to the test, often to very bad tests, and by focusing on these tests, you exclude everything that's not tested. So we see schools all over the country dropping the arts and physical education. Those are the things that tend to go early. The arts always go first. Some places have de-emphasized science, history, civics, foreign languages. All those things are not tested, and so these are the results of corporate reform. Who's behind it? Well, let me say first of all that the goals of corporate reform are privatization and deprofessionalization. By deprofessionalization, I mean that it's the idea that anyone can teach. You don't need any particular credentials or training, just maybe 5 or so weeks and you're a teacher. Sometimes not even that, just fill out the papers. Anyone can be a principal. You don't have to have been a teacher. You might go through a short training course and you can come from business or industry or the military and you're a principal. And anyone can be a superintendent. Another short training course, you don't need to have been a teacher or a principal. So that's deprofessionalization. The privatization is coming largely through the charter school movement and also with a renewed push for vouchers. And who is the corporate reform movement? It's Wall Street hedge fund managers, people in Wall Street. Generally, the New York Times has now run 3 major articles about Wall Street's affection for charter schools. There's a group called Democrats for Education Reform, which is kind of the big funding arm for a lot of the corporate reforms. Education reform now is part of the corporate reform movement, and there are lots of subsidiaries all over the country, in almost every state, pressing for legislation that would advance charter schools and that would make it easier to become a teacher, principal, or superintendent without any qualifications. And there's tons of money, tons of foundation money, the Gates Foundation, the Eli Broad Foundation, the Dell Foundation, the Walton Family Foundation. One can just go down the list, and there's a long, long list of billionaire foundations and hedge fund managers who are promoting this agenda. The problem is that these men, and they're mostly men, have made fortunes in the tech sector or in Wall Street, where you can make a fortune overnight. And so they expect to change schools overnight, and they want the big transformative idea. They don't understand that children learn one day at a time, and that they change. The cohort of children in school every year changes, and they demand silver bullets and instant answers, and none of their answers are right. None of them are based on research. None of them are based on evidence or practice.
And are they also behind the attacks against teachers?
Well, there's a lot of the corporate reform movement that's extremely antagonistic to unions. So yes, they have been supporting not all of these groups, but you don't see any of the hedge fund managers or the major foundations rushing to Madison, Wisconsin to show that they're in solidarity with the teachers' unions. In fact, they tend to be very critical of the teachers' unions, and I just recently saw an article that appeared last fall in the Chronicle of Philanthropy on how to end tenure. And this is one of the important reasons that people last in teaching, is that they know that after a certain point in time, they don't have lifetime tenure, they don't have a lifetime appointment. What they have is a guarantee that if they've served faithfully and well for a period of 3 or 4 years, they will then have due process if someone wants to fire them. And due process is not a guarantee of lifetime employment, it's simply a promise of fair treatment. And yeah, a lot of the corporate reformers would like to eliminate due process because they've helped to stimulate this national obsession with finding and firing bad teachers. So they would like to have unions made toothless. and eliminate tenure and also eliminate seniority. The corporate reform movement right now in New York is making a full court press to eliminate seniority.
And Diane, what are some of the major changes that you'd like to see in education?
Well, I would like to see all children getting the kind of education that children in the most privileged families have, and that would mean that we would have to devote adequate resources to make sure that everyone has a balanced curriculum. I think that every child, regardless of where they go to school, should have the arts and science and history and geography and civics and mathematics and foreign languages and physical education and health. That's what we consider a good education. The parents who can afford to send their children to the best schools would demand that, and I think that's what we should demand for all children. That would be one, but that would certainly not be the only one. I would like to see our society make a larger investment in early childhood education, and I'm speaking now not just about pre-kindergarten, but really birth through 5, because so many children, even at the age of 3, already have issues, and there's already an achievement gap at the age of 3 because of different home circumstances. So we need to do much more to level the playing field. Many children come to school in ill health. They have never seen a doctor, and they have medical needs, whether it's glasses or hearing aids, all sorts of problems that kids have today, and they should be taken care of. We should fulfill the promise, which was part of the national goals that were declared in 1990, over 20 years ago, that all children should come to school ready to learn. Ready to learn means able to learn as well as ready to learn. So that would be a big part of it. I would also love to see Congress fully fund special education. Special education is, for most districts, the single biggest item in their budget. And Congress promised many years ago to pay 40% of the cost, and it has traditionally paid about 12%. If Congress were to fully fund its promise and its mandate, pay 40% of the cost instead of 12%, every district in this country would find that they had adequate resources.
And what is the best way for people to make their voices heard? You just talked about Congress, and just this week they voted to continue funding the occupation in Afghanistan. Funding is never an issue when you talk about military spending.
Sure. Well, probably if we built 1 or 2 fewer airplanes and dropped a few fewer bombs, we'd have more money for education for sure. I've already forgotten the question.
Oh, just how do you make? I know you've been doing
what
this.
What do you do?
Yeah. What can people do?
What can people do? I think the most important thing to do is to make your voice heard. We live in a democracy, and we have to have political action. Congress has not heard from the citizenry. I know because I've been traveling the country. I've probably spoken now in about 80 different venues, maybe more. People are disgusted with No Child Left Behind. They're disgusted with the overemphasis on testing. They support their public schools, and our congressmen are not hearing it. So the people that you vote for, the people that you send to Congress, need to hear your voice. You need to write them. You need to get organized. And you need to speak out. You need to write letters to the editor. You need to write blogs. You need to comment on blogs. I mean, in every possible forum, if you care about public education, if you care about kids, if you care about the future of this country, you need to make your voice heard. Public education has been bound up with our democracy in this country now since the 1840s. Well over 150 years. We cannot afford to allow it to deteriorate. The status quo is totally unacceptable. We have to fight the status quo and fight for a much better education for all kids in this country. We have a communal responsibility. And the only way we're going to change things is if Congress hears us, because unfortunately what's happened since the passage of No Child Left Behind, it was signed into law in 2002. Since that law has been signed, it's Congress that's making the key decisions and not our state or local officials. So Congress needs to hear us.
Diane Ravitch is author of The Death and Life of the Great American School System, How Testing and Choice Are Undermining Education. And you can find a link to the radio show that we just did with a principal and a teacher from Sunnybray Elementary in the San Mateo Foster City School District, because we also think it's important to hear the voices of teachers and principals. Diane, thank you so much.
Thank you.